Hello and welcome to another episode of Mercurial Gems. I'm Vi.
I'm Jen.
And today we are doing Pluto Cancer 2.0.
Yes, so as we keep working through this Pluto series, we are both talking about some of the history of the times, and we're also linking it to interviews of people that can speak to the lived experience and story behind the signs. So we've already gotten to do an episode with my grandma who was Pluto Cancer, which we will definitely link below and highly recommend because we were able to pull so many beautiful themes in that. This episode, we have another Pluto Cancer where we actually thought it was very interesting for this interview because she was also raised by two Pluto Cancers. And as we've discussed in other episodes, Pluto varies in its transit for how big of a generational gap it holds and how big of the group it is, just depending on how fast or how slow it was transiting. And it moved through Pluto Cancer really slow. It moved through Pluto Gemini also relatively slow, and then Pluto really started moving quicker. So it's so funny for us to think of having parents and grandparents with such widely different Pluto signs, and then to know that a lot of the Pluto Cancer crew had parents that could have very well been in their same Pluto generation is very fascinating. And I think it was really cool in this interview that we'll share to be able to see the links. And so we're hoping to keep continuing to go through all of the different Plutos, and then we're going to keep adding just multiple layers to the generation. So this is part 2 of our Pluto Cancer. And so to refresh a couple of the themes that we really noticed as we went into the history. So Pluto was in Cancer from 1914 to 1938 in its most recent history. So World War I was 1918 to 1984. We also saw in those early 1920s, just a lot of talk of the Roaring 20s, the stuff that was going on there. Women's right to vote was something that also happened in that time period. The Great Depression was really at its peak from 1929 to 1930. We also had Pluto get discovered in 1930, which is just a fun little fact. And then right at the beginning of Pluto Cancer, Mother's Day was also established as a national holiday. So we thought that was also very fun. And the fact that Cancer as an archetype rules home life, family life, the emotional world. It's a water sign. Cancer also has a lot more links to ancestral connections. Cancer also traditionally kind of falls into more of the feminine archetype, but it's way more as just embodying that kind of cyclical nature because Cancer is connected to the moon. And so when you color in Pluto to it, we have to see the extremes of the sign. So we get to see the extremes of Cancer in all directions. And Pluto over time leads to a lot of rebirth energy and a lot of shifts over what that archetype looks like. And there was a lot of change that happened as Pluto was moving through Cancer. We spoke of it in part 1, but a lot of family stuff had to kind of re-tie in together because it was right fresh off the war. The war was at the very beginning of it, actually. And so all these families that were coming together were having to deal firstly with just having this family split up, having there be this change in what could be afforded for the family. A lot of families had to come together and help to raise children. There was just a lot of pulling it back versus when you see in Pluto Gemini, which would have been in the years 1884 to 1914, there was a very different world than what hit when Pluto moved into Cancer. And so, yeah, we've shared this before in part 1, but a lot of the themes that we saw was just the tie-ins of family, the roles of women, emotions being challenged and what emotional expression looked like. Also being protective over your family, what you passed down to your family, how you also protected your own emotions. And we've shared in this series too that with Pluto Cancer, The opposite sign is Pluto Capricorn. So for Pluto Cancer generation, they had to learn to embody some Pluto Capricorn energy to find balance.
More independence.
Yeah, finding good work, being able to actually create some structure systems. Like their whole world dramatically blew up when the war happened. And so for them, being able to find ways to be sustainable and create businesses, and all of this kind of comes out in our interview with Marylou, which was so interesting to see. And I also think it's very funny to think about the family unit having the same Pluto sign, because that also speaks to just the intensity of the family having to resolve kind of this generational shift together, like as a family unit, versus Pluto starts moving much faster. So the sign that your parents have is very different from the sign you have, at least in our
what we have interviewed so far, at least on this series, especially if this is like going to be your first video in, like this is the first time we're seeing this. And I do think Pluto Gemini was long enough to have multi-generation too. So it's just really interesting to see how much more, I guess, like generational understanding there was from like our POV of like looking back in these histories, and how they have almost more empathy with their parents than like when it becomes a split again and then it goes back to,
there's more understanding.
Whereas even now, usually at any given time you're dealing with like 3 different Plutos in family.
For sure. So that's some of the themes that we saw, and we definitely recommend for this series just seeing where your Pluto sign is, where your parents are, maybe even your grandparents, just so you can keep understanding just the blur of history with just your family's kind of generational themes, because that is the point of this Pluto series. And with that, we'd love for you to listen to our interview with the amazing Marylou. And we will also have a piece of her interview when we go into Pluto Gemini as well, since she was able to also help us speak to some of the themes and stories of even her parents' grandparents. Welcome. So we are going to interview the amazing Marylou, who we're so honored to be able to have as a storyteller, and just be able to speak to some of the memories that you hold of just your parents and grandparents, because it's really beautiful for us to be able to hear the links of generations, and so much has changed in your lifetime from what their lived world was that you were born into, and then how your life advanced. So I'd love to hear the blend of starting with some of your parents, some of the things that you remember growing up.
All right. Okay, well, I think also I'd like to give a little background of the fact that my mother and father met in Kansas City, where my mother was born. She was about 20 years old. The year was 1941, in the middle of a war, and they fell in love, and they decided to go ahead and get married, but it was a very difficult time, so people were really maybe pushing things a little bit to do that. But my mother told me years later that she had just read Gone with the Wind and was just loving it, and she thought she was coming to the Gone with the Wind South that was described in the book. And so years later, that they traveled around with, during the wartime, they did a lot of traveling from place to place with other families. But she was a bit disappointed when she finally did come to the South in Atlanta, Georgia, which was where my father's family was. And she was a bit disappointed. It wasn't what was described in Gone with the Wind. So I think she carried that for a while. But she did share that they really had, there was a lot of friendships that were made between the wives of the soldiers, and that she really enjoyed the fact that as they were traveling around, that they would all kind of be in a big house together, and they would be cooking together, and she really liked that. She really liked that quite a bit.
How many kids did she have? How many siblings?
She, growing up, she really only had she had a half brother.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a divorce very early on. Before she was born, there was a divorce. And so, so she had a half brother.
Okay. And then how many of you guys were there?
Well, I'm the oldest of 6.
Okay, so yeah,
Okay.
a huge family.
Yes, the oldest of 6, and it was during that time that there were a lot of GI benefits. My father told me that he was really pleased that he could, get a house loan so easily and get a business loan. So the government really had a lot of programs set up after the war for those soldiers that had participated in the war.
Yeah.
So he was very grateful. And he was very grateful for the VA hospital. So, he didn't have many complaints along that line.
Yeah.
So my mother was a very traditional mother. She loved to celebrate. So we had big Christmases, and we had a lot of gifts that around the tree.
Yeah.
But back to her time, when she was growing up, she did go through the Depression, and she did talk to me a little bit about the Depression. She was saying how during that time there was no money, and that any woman that had a baby usually could not afford to have a cradle. So they would take the drawer out of the dresser and they would pad it up, and that would be the new cradle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was kind of amazed at that.
Yeah.
So, but she didn't talk a lot about that, except that I think that they were both pretty frugal.
Yeah.
Pretty frugal with their money. Although my mother's favorite saying was, in case there was like a problem, an accident, or there was something we had to take care of financially, she would just say, well, it's just money.
Yeah.
It's just money. So I think that depression thing helped to kind of like help people look at, or at least she really felt like, well, we can't put too much emphasis on the money.
Yeah, family was going to be more important. The things you had to put relationship into.
Yes.
Yeah, could you feel like some of their, could you feel some of the emotion behind some of the war stuff growing up? Do you have like memory of like realizing like behind the scenes, or did she kind of keep a pleasant?
She did. She kept it pleasant.
Yeah.
She did. She kept.
And
it
you said
very
your dad
pleasant.
wouldn't even talk about the Great Depression
No,
much.
and when we would ask him about the war, because he was there, he didn't want to talk about it, which is I think is what I have heard from other situations, that usually the man didn't want to talk about it. He made it sound like he actually enjoyed having that camaraderie with the other guys. They were all, young. They were in their 20s, and so he did. I think he was more in the South Pacific. I think that's where he was. He did learn some skills that he was able to bring into a job situation. So he said that he was in the communication where, like, airplanes were landing and they were trying to communicate with them, and so when he came out of the service, he opened up a radio shop in Buckhead in Atlanta, Georgia, and then when TVs came along, he fixed television.
Oh, cool!
So he was able to use that.
Yeah.
And he did not go to college. He said he did go down to one of the colleges downtown, but he didn't feel like there was anything there that he wanted to learn that he didn't already know. So he pretty much stayed with the business.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you feel like you got way closer to your mom, or was your dad home just as much, like later in the...
Well, I would say it was much more closer to my mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say definitely much closer. And so I grew up in the time where really women were culturally supposed to get married and raise a family. That was it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember being told that that there was no money for college for me.
Yeah.
And that it was more important for a man to go to school, to college, because he had to support the family.
Yeah.
But mother said, doesn't mean you can't go to college. It just means that we can't pay for it.
Yeah.
So I did go to college.
I like that she
it.
sprinkled the seed for you.
What was that?
I like that she sprinkled the seed for
Oh,
you
she
of
did.
like,
Yeah,
I
she
may
said-
not be able to pay
That's
for
right.
it,
Yeah.
but you
But
should
don't
maybe
feel
go.
shame about
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Right. And so I went to Georgia State.
Amazing.
Yeah, I went down there and I paid for it, and I worked after. I
Uh-huh.
started my first job when I was 14 and worked in a clothing store.
Oh, very
And
nice.
it was great. I loved it. I can remember saying to them, would you hire me? I don't think that's a right approach that you're supposed to do in a job interview, and they were like, yes.
I love
and
it.
so it was great.
Aww.
And what about your siblings? Like, how did it feel? Like, yeah, how did you watch your parents shift as you kind of left the house? Because you were probably doing a lot of parental roles with 6 kids, right, too?
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that my father died at the age of 50.
Oh, yeah, wow.
And that was pretty big. He had some cardiac problems, so he was sick for maybe the last couple of years.
So how old were you then at that point?
It was in my early 20s.
Okay, yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And so then your
Or
mom still had most of the kids then?
She did.
Yeah.
She did. Yeah, she did.
Wow.
Yeah, she had like a 5-year-old and, you know, a 7-year-old. So so that made it kind of hard.
Yeah.
That made it hard. And she worked outside the home then.
Okay.
You know, because she had to.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had to do it. I think some of the things that I took away from my child rearing with these, you know, with my parents was, and it wasn't really said, but somehow I just understood. That first of all, there were not a lot of financial resources, and I don't think there was a lot of emotional resources.
Yeah.
So the idea was, whatever you mess up, you clean up. And so, even to this day, there's really been no rescuing in my family.
Yeah.
I mean, out of the 6 children, people have made mistakes and they've gone their way or they've done things. But there wasn't that, as I came to find out in other households as I got older, that there was this rescuing going on that I never quite understood. You know, people might begin to falter, and then there was a rush of relatives to prop them back up again.
Yeah.
So that they could go on, but no.
Yeah.
That was not going to happen.
Yeah. And I feel like some of the extremes in the time frame too was like there was still a really weird gap in like what things you could communicate and share. Like what emotions did you keep held in? Like which things did you actually let out? So I think for a lot it was like you needed to hold that emotional burden for yourself because you shouldn't put it on other people. So I think some families were so closeted from talking about struggle, and then it seems like some maybe bridged that gap, but it probably was, you know, just depending on a lot of circumstances. But I know a lot of people would not want to go there. So it even makes sense that your dad didn't want to talk about anything hard, because later generations had to break the cycle of like not holding so much in, because realizing that can cause like a lot of like mental health struggle when you're having to like play such a part. And I think, you know, that got way better later, but I know it was probably in its peak, especially as there were very valid reasons to be hurting, and yet I don't know if everyone was as vocal about it.
So that was.
Do you want an astrology fun fact?
Yeah.
Attached to Dad?
Yeah.
Dad was Pluto Moon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. But still Pluto Cancer.
And Cancer Moon.
Okay. Yeah, so your dad had an extra layer of like kind of blocking the emotions. Like his emotions felt like they were hard to control in either direction. So either like it felt like it was going to be way too intense, or he tried to cut them all off. So he had trouble with middle ground in his chart then. Yeah. What else do you remember, like in your younger years? How else do you remember, even beyond your parents? How did you view a lot of the adults around you? Because you guys were right kind of at this transit between Pluto generations, because the generation before you had all these crazy themes around. That's when books started coming out, like really big storylines. There was a lot more being shared, and film stuff was starting, art stuff was coming out. So there was all these new things, and then we had the like war and all of that come in, which changed a lot of it. So I'm curious what you remember and the adults you like looked up to as a kid beyond even just your parents. Any thoughts on that?
Wow, that is kind of a big question. I remember my father was definitely into having friends. Okay, he was a big social person. Okay, my mother was really much more of reading books and you know, and relatives. Yes, she wanted to be really close to the relatives, but he had some crazy little friends.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, they would have parties at the house, but these friends would run around to our windows and be like scaring us.
Yeah, like goofy.
Yes. So I would say that there were some pretty goofy adults,
yeah.
and I would be like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure about this.
Yeah.
But I would say.
What about teachers and stuff, or any of the people you went to, like young? Yeah.
I think I had surgery when I was 7.
Yeah.
I had the measles.
Oh wow.
And one of the complications of the measles is that encephalopathy. And so I had this infection behind my ear. And so I had to go in for surgery, and that was, very frightening for me. I was 7 years old.
So scary.
That's before they say, oh, parents should stay with their children. No.
Wow.
Parents went home, and there I was in this ridiculous bed. It was terrible.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine.
But so afterwards, I was behind in school. So I would say what really helped me was there was a tutor who came, and so I really did appreciate this person sitting one-to-one to me, with me and helping me catch up. Yeah. So that was really good. But I wasn't really exposed to a lot of adults. It's interesting that you said that. I was thinking,
because you were so in the home with your your family.
Yeah, I was so in the home with the family, and then we did have I had an aunt and uncle that lived pretty close. So so that would be 2 people that I did look up to, was his aunt and uncle, and it was my father's brother. Yeah. And so I would say, I did look up to them, and they were very helpful, and they would often visit. So I had kind of forgotten about them.
Do you remember some of their hobbies, like where your mom was into reading, which, it was funny looking at the history of that time because so many big books came out. Like that was one of the things we were really...
I think Gone with the Wind was one of them.
There was so many big stories. But do you remember aunt and uncle being readers or what they were interested in?
Well, I think that my uncle was into electrical, and he wasn't an engineer, but he was into that level. Electrical stuff.
There's a lot of stuff coming out at that time too.
He was really into that. I think he worked for Georgia Power, from London. But my aunt, she was like a model for us in that we were so amazed that as she cooked, this sounds kind of crazy, but as she cooked, she cleaned up the pots and pans as she cooked, and we were like,
multitask.
Wow, look at this. And her house was so clean. And we were like, oh, wow, how does she do this? And she would cook a meal, and then as you would go to sit down at the table, you'd look back at the kitchen, and there was nothing to be cleaned up. She cleaned it up immediately. So she was kind of like our model for a woman who knew how to take care of a house. Yes. And even when we had children and we would go visit her, it was back in the day where you had just the cotton diapers that had to be rinsed out in the toilet. And we were like, oh, we don't mind going to this toilet because we know how clean it is.
I love that. I love that.
It's going to be A-okay.
It's going to be fine for us to rinse that out.
Did she have kids? Did your aunt and uncle?
She did. They had 2 daughters, and they were close to our age.
Cool.
So we would actually, play with them.
Amazing.
But so both of them were kind of examples of the straight and narrow.
Do you remember hearing a lot about the presidents? How did you take in news and stuff as a kid? Do you remember some of that?
Well, we did have, of course, we had the radio. Okay. But I do remember the television. So it was just coming on. But my mother did talk a lot about Roosevelt and the fact that he just saved the country, in the 1920s, the mid-20s, with the Depression, and how he had rescued. And so I would say that the Democratic Party was first on in our household. It was.
I guess you were getting newspapers, and then how old were you when you remember starting to get TV stuff?
Gosh, I was trying to think when TV came out.
My grandma was saying too, she was one of the first people to have the TV on her block, so everyone was going to her house, she said.
It was really, it was in the 50s, but I'm trying to think of, of exactly. Maybe I was 10 years old.
Okay, yeah.
52 or
Yeah.
so. It is, perhaps that's when it came about.
Because then you started getting exposure to more celebrities and like kind of examples because you
Yes.
started seeing people, but that wasn't in its prime as much beforehand.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
So we did hear, they would have news in the evening.
Yeah.
And so we did have that. And there were newspapers, and people did read newspapers, and particularly that Sunday newspaper, what was a big deal. It had the comics and it had a lot of news in it. So definitely the radio and the TV, the news got around.
I love it.
Yeah.
How do you remember your relationship being with like your siblings compared to even your parents when you got to like check back? Like how was the advancement even beyond you moving out of the house? Like I know you said your grandma moved in and
She
helped.
did.
Yeah,
she did. Yeah. So she moved in. I got married when I was 19, almost 20. And so maybe she had just been there for a couple of years. So as for my siblings, I would say that I have a sister that's 13 months younger, and I'm close to her, and we did play together growing up, okay, because she's 13 months younger. But I'm the closest to the one who is the youngest, and she was born on my birthday.
Oh, cool.
On August 16th, and I was 16.
August 16th on your 16th birthday.
Yes. And so then I would carry her around. People would say, "Oh, is that your baby?"
Yeah,
It's not my baby. But she and I are the closest now.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
Yeah. So that's it. But my brothers, I wasn't that close with them. If there's a sister that's in between, like it was 3 girls and then 2 boys and then a girl. So I mean, we still like keep in touch with each other.
Yeah.
But I am the closest to the youngest one.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I'm not real sure why that is, but yeah, I am.
Yeah.
But I did want to say something about just that time period of I was pretty well set up to get married. That's what I was supposed to do, and so I didn't even think about were there other choices until I was probably in my late. Maybe I was 28 or 29. My next door neighbor said, "Don't you wish that you could go to college?" And I'm like, "No, I mean, what do I need to be? What are you talking about?" I mean, it was just a big shock when she said it. And that's when it started to roll in.
Yeah.
All of this women's lib and freedom. And so that did have a big influence on me.
Yeah.
So I was in my 30s, my early 30s, before I decided to go to nursing school. And I would say that whole turn of events with women's lib had a big influence on me.
Yeah.
And so I felt like it was an opportunity to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old did your mom live to be?
89.
Okay, yeah, so good genes. So how did she feel about your nursing school stuff?
Oh, she was glad. She was very glad.
Yeah, that was huge. And you probably set such a example for your younger siblings too.
One of my brothers, he went to nursing school too.
Yeah.
But then he didn't like it he didn't like doing that, but he decided to go ahead and be a respiratory therapist.
Yeah.
And so he stayed with the VA as the respiratory therapist.
So what year would you have started nursing then?
I started it in 1972.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, you definitely were right there when a lot started shifting too.
There was a lot shifting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You can speak to some of that too. I'd love to hear some of what you remember in your early career stuff because I feel like that would be really fascinating too.
Well, I mean, for the early career, like as a nurse, I think that one of the things that helped me grow the most.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a great place that I was able to work at not too far from where I lived. And of course I had been taught to like always be kind of polite and maybe, as a Southern girl, not maybe say what you want to say. But the people I was working with at this psychiatric hospital, they were students from Georgia Tech, from Georgia State. and Emory too. The doctors came from Emory, and they said to me, these students said to me, will you just stop communicating the way you are? Just say what you think. And I'm like, oh, now I can say what I think. Okay. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I knew I was in another place.
Yeah.
I knew. And these doctors that came from Emory, they were young. Okay, they were very young. And they were really wanting to teach. And so it was incredible because they would take us and teach us about group dynamics and take us through this whole process. It took so that we could even predict what's going to happen in the next group, what's going to happen in the next group. And he took us through this whole thing of this is how groups go through, different stages. He took us through the stages of the groups and how to help them get to the next stage. I mean, that was something I would have never been exposed to. So that has helped me so much with groups. I love to do groups. Even now, I like to do groups.
Awesome.
And I wouldn't have that level of confidence if I didn't have that background. So it was big.
Yeah, how did it feel being a woman in the field? Like, how do you remember early on versus later in your career?
Well, I think always there was a place for women.
Yeah.
In nursing, there's always a place.
Yeah.
And if you're an RN, usually what happens is that you've got like, it's all about the money.
Yeah.
Okay, so the money's going to come through because of medical documentation and what the medical profession says is necessary. Okay, so being an RN, that you're like one little piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But that piece has to be there. Okay, so I would say that I don't remember there being. No.
That was the first profession that kind of carved its way for women to not get stifled so much too.
But I will say that the first job that I had, which came out of nursing school, it was at Emory, and I decided to go into the rehab. Okay, but that's where I hit this thing. You were asking about the acceptance of women, not from the other staff, but from another nurse, a nurse who had gone through. Nursing, you can still. I think you can still do a couple levels. You can be associated with a hospital, and you do a 3-year thing. That's the way it used to be. And then you would work on the floor. They loved you to work on the floor. And then it went to like associate degrees. And it'd be a 2-year. At one of the local colleges, and you can get that 2 years. So there were the 3 years. Then the 2 years. The 2 years we didn't have as much experience, enough hands-on experience. And then later you could get your degree, going on. So I would say that the pushback for my very first job was this woman who was a nurse from a hospital who told me that I would never make a good nurse. I would never be a good nurse because I had not had the training that she had.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, we're not staying here. No. So I stayed a few months, but then I thought, no, I'm not going to put up with
Good
this.
for you. Good for you.
No.
Yeah.
So then I went on to the psychiatric part, which is what I wanted, and that's where I felt that I could have the most impact. And I really enjoyed it. I liked the people I worked with, and I liked the patients. So it was a good experience.
And that was also like, the start of like really starting to see the links of how you need to be able to talk about your feelings. So I feel like that was good alchemy, because not everyone believed in psychiatric stuff, early on. It was like, hush, keep it quiet, put them away, don't talk about it. And I think that expanded a lot as you were stepping in.
It did expand. It also helped with boundaries. So they taught me, and these were the students from Georgia State. They're like, okay. You got to be real clear when you communicate. Don't bring in your own stuff. Don't bring in your own frustration and your own anger and all this stuff. You just step back from that, and then you can communicate clearly.
And not take things personal.
And you've got to have a boundary.
Yep.
You cannot take them home, and you cannot heal them right now. You can't do that. You're going to have to just well, it was the present moment. They didn't know that. I mean, it wasn't talked about then.
Yeah.
But it was.
Yeah. Lots of spiritual understanding that you got later too. That
Exactly.
makes sense,
Okay,
yes.
I didn't know. But it was a great time for mental health. This was in the 70s
Yeah.
and into the 80s.
Yep.
Where there was money for private insurance to go. And we
And
had
huge movements of advocacy starting to like say like, yeah,
it was wonderful.
It doesn't mean something's wrong. Yeah, this
Exactly.
is there is a diversity of humans.
Exactly.
Which was like in your younger years that was so not talked about.
No.
Do you remember anyone in the family ever thinking it was interesting you did psychiatry stuff? Yeah. What do you remember?
Yeah. I mean they just remember that, sometimes I wouldn't tell them names of course, but just tell them some stories.
Yeah.
And they would be like, oh, because this was a whole group getting into their feelings, and I had a family where we weren't really doing
right.
Like, oh wow. Is that what they're doing out there?
In the world, in the wild world.
In the wild world, exactly.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, so psychiatric nursing has always been what I've enjoyed.
Yeah, I love to hear all the themes. Yeah. Anything else you want to share that comes to mind? I feel like this was great.
I know. I've enjoyed sharing this. I think I think one thing too is that I really feel like that my family didn't say it, but it was there, that being independent was very important.
Yeah.
Being independent, being able to take care of oneself, being able to get that job. And I always heard this, don't quit the job you've got until you've got the next one.
Yeah.
I remember that was a thing. Don't go without the job.
Yeah.
So jobs were very important.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And being independent.
Yeah. And that's really good that they held those, even with like the stricter society roles of getting married and having a kid in home. I'm glad that your family also still were helping you to realize, like, because they also just had learned, like, not everything is what you expect could happen. Like, they were not anticipating what happened.
No.
So it's good that they were raising you guys to know that we only have control of so many things. So keep perspective.
Yes, So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for sharing your stories.
It was very enjoyable.
Yeah, we love the stories. We appreciate you.
If you want to find more about us, we have links down in the description. You can always support the channel by liking, subscribing, interacting. We would love to know your thoughts on any Pluto epiphanies that happened as you watched. In the comments, we always love open discussion. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye.